Good afternoon, everyone. We are have opened the doors and are letting everyone come in. So we'll take just a few seconds and let so that Zoom can let everybody in. I am Van Jeffrey with AGE-u-cate Training Institute. I apologize that you are not seeing me, but as technology will be, I logged into this this webinar early, and it is not reading my computer camera. So you're not going to see me, but that's okay because you'll see Holly, and that's the most important thing. So we still got some people getting in. On these, I always imagine everybody coming in the doors and finding their seat and, you know, getting their mints out and getting out a pen.
Yep.
So we are so glad you all came to this. We had a really great response. Obviously, it is a topic that is on lots of people's minds right now. Anyone in the elder care world or that knows people that are in elder care or loves older people, this is a topic that we are all concerned with right now. So Holly has a lot to tell us and talk to us about today. So we are going to go ahead and let me get her introduced, and we will get going. Just so you know, this is being recorded. So if you have colleagues who registered and didn't get a chance to get here today, everyone who registered will get a link to the recording afterwards. And you'll also be able to share that. If you listen to this and think, oh, I know some people that need to hear this, you'll get that link so that you can share it. But right now, I want to introduce and welcome Holly Glover. Holly is a licensed professional counselor. She is currently Director of Education and Family Support at the James L. West Center for Dementia Care in Fort Worth, Texas. Holly is a dementia care specialist and has over 28 years of experience in education with people of all ages. She is a recognized national and statewide speaker on topics such as dementia, hospice, and caregiver stress for both unpaid and professional caregivers. Her passion is educating the public and helping families who have loved ones who are diagnosed with dementia. So the heartbreak and cost of isolation strategies for coping during the pandemic. Holly, we are all figuring out all kinds of things to cope with this pandemic, but the isolation of our seniors is really a concern. So look forward to hearing what you have to say about it.
Thank you. Well, we will go ahead and get started. I'll be sharing my screen in just a minute, and you will be getting these slides. As I was telling Ben earlier, I have added stuff to this all the way up to about an hour ago because this has been, this topic, there's lots of stuff out there about it right now, and it's changing. It's changing. If you work in long-term care, you know that things have been changing in the past week. And so I've been able to go in and find some statistics that I'm going to share with you today that I think are really interesting, and will leave you shaking your head at some of this as well. So we do have CEUs for those of you who are social work and licensed professional counselors also. I wanted to add that through the West Center. So let me share my screen. All right. Is that good, Van? You're able to see?
Yes, we sure can. It looks great, Holly.
Okay, thanks. So some of the things that we're going to talk about over the next hour, and we are going to have a time for questions at the end. Van will be watching the chat, so if you want to type something into the chat, you certainly can. We will... I got to get my screen closed so I can pay attention to what I'm doing here. But we will have a time for questions, and then she will answer anything that she can. But please do type anything that you would like to into the chat. So we're going to talk about isolation and the impact that it's having on all individuals, those of us who work in the field, professionally, family caregivers, as well as folks that are placed during this time, specifically those that have dementia. We're also going to talk about some self-care and some coping techniques. And here's our objectives for those of you who will be getting the CEUs at the end. We're going to talk a lot about the emotional impact of isolation as well. So isolation is difficult on everybody, even those people who like to spend time alone. There's just a certain amount of time that we can spend alone, because one of the worst things that we can do is be alone with our own thoughts for too long. If you're prone to depression, if you're prone to anxiety, it can even be more problematic to be isolated. And one of the things that we tend to do when we're isolated is that we ruminate and we go over and over and over, and our mind can start to run away with us. And that's where we can find ourselves really getting ourselves into trouble. Whenever we start thinking too much in the past, that's depression. That's when we can have a lot of depression set in. When we start worrying a lot about the future, that is more anxiety. So when we're focusing on the past, that's where we lean more toward depression. When we focus more on the future, that is more anxiety. But we were made to be social, and it is natural to want to connect with other people. And when all of this was starting about 7 months ago, we had to start getting pretty creative, just like we're doing here today. So think about in prison. One of the worst things that can happen is for somebody to be put in solitary confinement. It can even be lethal for some people.
Census is 58, 2, and 0. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Okay, so what is the cost of isolation during the pandemic? These are some of the statistics that I was able to find this week that if you haven't seen these, I think you're going to be shocked. This came from the Chief of Mortality Statistics at the CDC. Deaths attributed to dementia rose more than 20% above normal over the summer this past year. 61,000 deaths between June and September, which is up 11,000 from the same time last year. Year to date, there are over 26,000 extra dementia deaths this year. These are people who did not have the coronavirus, but their deaths were most definitely linked to the virus. Due to the increased isolation and just the stress during lockdown and other contributing factors that we are going to touch on today. And then the federal efforts to address nursing homes amid the pandemic have been far too little and tragically way too late for many. And again, those of you who work in the field know exactly what I'm talking about. We started seeing changes in our residents almost immediately upon shutdown, and we can contribute it to isolation. And again, we'll be getting a little deeper into that as we go through. So long-term care just hasn't been a priority, and the residents and the families are suffering from it. We're not just seeing the residents suffer from this isolation, we're also seeing family members. Some people who have never been away from their spouse for 7 months, or from their parent or their friend or their brother or their sister. And FaceTime and window visits just aren't the same. So PPEs and testing are mandated, but they are in short supply. So that also adds to the stress. It adds to the stress of the staff. It adds to the stress then of the residents as well, because they pick up on everything that is going on. People with dementia are able to read body language, gestures, tone, all the way through the end of their life. So advocates that are wanting families to be able to visit their loved ones in nursing homes, and we've just found out that we are being able to open this week with a lot of restrictions because we still have to prevent the virus from spreading. However, the isolation and stress can worsen multiple health issues, including dementia. And again, we've seen that happen. We've seen people who have had a significant decline in their dementia, and we know that it is directly related to this isolation. So here are some other things that I was able to find this week, and then there's starting to be a lot of articles and statistics come out because we are into the 7th, getting ready to start into the 8th month of this. Residents across the country in long-term care are having significant declines in weight, their social abilities, and their communication skills since the onset of the shutdown. And then this is what breaks my heart as well as a counselor and somebody who works in memory care. Family members are becoming heartsick over not being able to see their loved ones for months. And there is actually a diagnosis called broken heart syndrome. And it is a temporary heart condition that's often brought on by stressful situations. It is a real thing. And I have had too many of those phone calls with people saying, this is going to kill my dad to not be able to see my mom. This is killing my, and it is. They're starting to have some significant changes to their health. And this is the caregiver. This is the caregiver who is at home, but not able to come and see and be with their loved one. So we know that having families back in their lives in person would bring back joy for everyone who was involved. And many people with dementia don't understand FaceTime or phones. And so they haven't even been able to participate in doing a FaceTime visit or a window visit. And because we have been able to have family members come in sporadically if their loved one were to become imminent, we have actually seen this happen where we had somebody declining to the point that they were imminent. We were able to bring in a family member to sit with them bedside, and we saw them get better. So I've watched it happen several times throughout the course of the last several months. We're just bringing in the loved one to be with them. They actually have had a very positive response. So what is happening? And there's a lot of ideas and a lot of theories out there about what is going on right now. But why is it that we're having this weight loss? Why is it that they're losing social skills and they're losing the ability to communicate? Well, we have family members, and you may be some of the family members that saw their loved one every single day. And when they came in, they may have shown up with ice cream every day, or they assisted at mealtime every day. And there's not a long-term care anywhere that has one-on-one where they have a CNA or a nurse to every single resident that they've got. That just doesn't happen. So if they were used to having these extra treats brought in or having assistance with their mealtime by a family caregiver, that could be a very real reason why there's been a decline. Stress over seeing everyone in PPEs. Everybody with a mask, goggles, gown, gloves. I actually had a family member tell me that her mom was finally able to say to her that the place had a lot of criminals or bandits around because everybody had on a mask and they were covered up. And she was associating a face being covered up with a bandit. And so she wasn't eating, she wasn't communicating, she was starting to withdraw because she thought that she was surrounded by a bunch of bad people and it was just their PPEs. But because she has dementia, that's the way that she was seeing it. And that makes a lot of sense. And of course, not being able to explain to her, this is just a mask because we're trying to keep, she can't be reasonable or rational. She has dementia. All she sees is a bandit. She sees somebody that has a mask on that she's actually kind of afraid of. A lot of places also are short-staffed, either because they lost people because they're having to stay home and homeschool their children, or they're afraid to come to work, or they got the virus. But a lot of places right now are short-staffed. And then we've got people that are having to act as universal workers. And a universal worker is somebody who does a little bit of everything. They may be providing care, they may be providing the engagements, and they may be serving the food, and they may be doing the laundry. So a lot of places have had to start using people as universal workers that maybe could have been providing more one-on-one time with someone. But during this time, they're having to be a universal worker just to get everything done in a facility. The other thing that's happened, and this is just across the board, is a change in routine. So it's extremely stressful for residents, families and professional caregivers as well, whenever our routines are changed. And we can get into something called compassion fatigue and burnout. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But again, people who have dementia, people who don't have dementia, they pick up on the stress that we as professional healthcare workers are carrying with us during this time. Even with that mask on, they can see it on our face. They can read us, they can read our body language, our tones, and our gestures. So what can we do if our loved one is placed? And I wrote this slide before we started opening up this week, and we're starting to be able to have some folks come in. I know assisted living has been able to have some come in for a little bit longer, but some of the best things that we've had happen are care packages coming in for the staff and for your loved ones, sending things to them with handwritten notes, or sending them photos, copies of photos, make sure it's copies of photos, where you have actually been able to label across the bottom and you write them a note across the bottom, or you make a photo album through some of these places like Walgreens, where you can put the pictures in there and you tell them the story. You're basically telling them their own story. And those are some great things to send whenever you can't be in. Sending those handwritten notes and letters, not only to your loved ones, but sending them to the staff. And I know we have a whole wall down by our time clock that is filled with cards and letters that have come in from family members. The staff will sit there and read those. They really do appreciate them. Being able to FaceTime, we do have some that can FaceTime. And even if they can't FaceTime or they don't understand what's happening, sometimes it helps us just to be able to see them, to see that they are okay, just to be able to get a glimpse of what they are doing. I've already put about the photos and books, and then writing and calling our state officials. We believe that this is one of the reasons why we are being able to start to open up this week, is because families have gone on a campaign of letter writing to the state officials and praying and keeping faith. Absolutely. So I want to talk about what it is that you may be feeling. And I know that we had a call with our families this past Friday, and I talked about this, and we're putting some things together for our families actually today that's going to go out in an email. But if you are one that hasn't been able to be in to see your loved ones, I do want to take a few minutes to talk about what that's going to be like the first time that you are face-to-face in person when you haven't seen them in 7 months. You can have some really unusual emotions overcome you that maybe you weren't expecting, because you may be thinking you're going to go in and this is just going to be a very joyful moment and you're going to be filled, you've got these huge expectations. But the reality is that if your loved one has dementia, that disease didn't stop because we have a pandemic going on. That disease has continued to march on for 7 months. And so they are 7 months further into a progressive disease. And so one of the things that you're going to be feeling, and part of what we need to do is to be able to call it what it is, and it's grief. Because we may get in and see our loved one and they aren't the person that they were in March. They don't look the same. They're not using the same words. They may not be acting the same. Maybe they're not walking anymore or not feeding themselves anymore. They might not recognize us, especially immediately. And before we go in, I think it's really wise for us to think about that ahead of time. We need to grieve that time that we lost. We need to grieve the abilities that they lost during those 7 months. Now, we've got to stay focused in the present. We've got to think about quality of life, but we also need to acknowledge what this is that we're feeling and calling it grief. So many times when we use the word grief, we just associate that with death, and grief is loss. And we all have gone through a tremendous amount of loss recently. So be prepared of a flood of emotions. And I just wanted to mention a few things. You know, if you do start to cry, that's okay. But I would be very careful about what you say to your loved one. One of the things that I would suggest, and we know we have to use therapeutic stories with people that have dementia. Some people call those lies. Some people call those fiblets. I've always called them therapeutic stories. But rather than mentioning anything about time, well, it's been 7 months since I've seen you, you can just use, I'm just so happy to see you, it made me cry. And then make sure that what they can see of you, that you are sure smiling with your eyes. But go ahead and have those tears, acknowledge those tears. but time doesn't mean the same to somebody with dementia. So we're not going to want to focus in on the time. And then I put this in bold, and please, if you hear nothing else, if you've got your loved one is placed and you're getting ready to see them, please, please, please do not go in and ask them, do you know who I am? Do you remember me? And don't try to test their memory. That is not going to be good for you. That is not going to be good for them. And it could actually trigger a challenging behavior. That is not something that you want to do or be responsible for. It could make them very upset, and then it's probably going to make you upset as well. So call them by their relationship to you. If it is your mom, call them mom. If it's your aunt, if it's your husband, call them by your sweet names that you have for each other. But please don't ask them, do you know who I am, or do you remember me? We never want to use the word remember with somebody with dementia anyway, because you're reminding them that they forgot when you do that. One of the best things that you can probably do going in for a visit for the first time, for the first few times, is come in with something to do, because you know that you're not going to be able to sit there and just have a banter back and forth. So if you come in with your phone loaded with music that you know that they love, and this is usually going to be the music from when they were younger, from their music set, from when they were a teenager or in their 20s, somewhere in there. And even if you just sit and listen to music together, or you sing, or you dance, or you're just listening to the music and patting hands or holding hands, looking at photos together. Now, we tend to want to show them photos of what's going on right now in our lives, but they need to see photos from the past, photos of them with their brothers and sisters or their mom and dad, because that's where they are. Food is always a hit. So if you show up with something sweet, the sweeter the better, because we know that they are getting to the point where sweet is all that they can taste. And if you show up with ice cream or you show up with cookies, that's always going to be a plus. And then items that they might know, maybe a quilt or something that is from their past. And then that gives you something to sit and visit with them about. And then keeping in mind not to ask them things like, well, how have you been the last 7 months since I haven't seen? They don't know how they've been the last 7 months. They don't even know that it's been 7 months. They may think that it's been 7 days, or they may think that it's been a year. We don't know. So just being very careful with the things that you say. Another thing we need to be prepared for is for them to walk away or to fall asleep. They're not used to us being here. And you're probably going to be in an area where you're going to need to stay with them, and they may get up and walk away. And we've got to remember, we accommodate the disease. They don't. They can't. They would if they could. So we have to be okay with that. Even if we don't like it, time doesn't mean the same thing to them. So give yourself permission to leave. You may come planning on a 30-minute visit, and they may plan on a 5-minute visit. And no, that is, but we've been accommodating their disease all along. And so we accommodate the disease. Maybe today I can do a 5-minute visit, and next week I can do a 10-minute visit, and we kind of work back into our visits. It's probably going to take them a little while to get used to us coming to see them again. What we want to focus on is the present and quality of life, not going back and staying in those 7 months that we lost. Acknowledge them, call them what it is, but not hanging up right there, focusing on the present and what we can still do. So keeping in mind that during this time, we cannot take our mask off, but we can sure smile with our face. Speak very, very clearly and look them in the face as you're speaking, because everybody's going to be tempted to pull that mask down. We can't do that. So we've just got to speak in a very clear voice. And then think ahead of time, like I said, about how this is going to affect you and your loved one. If you can, get in with a support group someplace. We have 2 here that meet just like this online. And I know the Alzheimer's Association has support groups. There are several in town, and we're going to give you some of those resources at the end of this. So now let's start talking a little more about self-care. While we have been isolated, we need to take care of ourselves, whether you're a professional caregiver or you're a family caregiver. We're some of the worst people about taking care of ourselves because we are so busy taking care of everybody else. So what is self-care? The practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, especially during periods of stress. And I think we would all agree the whole year 2020 has been a period of stress. And then what are coping skills? These are adaptive coping strategies which reduce stress. And you see I added on there constructive coping skills because many of us also have negative, destructive coping skills. Because, as I've got up here on the screen, we tend to learn coping strategies from those we grew up around. And we may have grown up watching mom and dad or aunts and uncles or grandparents deal with stress in a way that wasn't very positive. And even though we may know better and we have developed some other coping strategies, when we are faced with stressful situations, we tend to revert back to what we know. Multiple times, I have had families that are on this journey of dementia tell me, I haven't smoked in years, Holly, and I just picked up cigarettes for the first time in 30 years because I'm going back to what I used to use as a coping skill. Or the one I hear the most, I used to have 1 glass of wine every evening, and now I finish the bottle. It's become my go-to. When we learn or develop a negative coping skill, we tend to turn stressors into catastrophes also, and we actually call that catastrophizing. Whenever we take something that if we actually will kind of stand back a minute, use some positive coping skills, we can work through this, we can walk through this just like we're doing right now, but we can also get into that all or nothing thinking, and so a lot of positive self-talk going to come into play here. So positive coping skills allow us to become more resilient in the face of a challenge, including feelings of anger, anxiety, or depression. We're going to talk about where those feelings come from. So I've got this little thing here, you can't pour from an empty cup, take care of yourself first. And I've added this about compassion fatigue because I know we've got a lot of professionals that are on today. So compassion fatigue happens to professionals whenever we are physically, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted, and it's associated with because we are caring for someone. We see it more in caregivers of those that have dementia or people who work in hospice because the people that we are working with are not getting better. So those of us who work in the field of anybody who's end of life, or a terminal disease like dementia, you see a high rate of compassion fatigue, and this is actually diagnosable. People hate to use it. They act like it's some type of a weakness to say, you know, I'm worn out physically, emotionally, spiritually. But think about why that happens. Why is it that people who are taking care of those who are terminal have more compassion fatigue than who take care of others? People we take care of aren't getting better. And for those people that are family caregivers, you know, whenever somebody has a diagnosis of, let's just say some type of a cancer, but there's a treatment for it. And so we can say, well, you know, we're getting treatment, so we'll know something soon. When we're taking care of somebody with dementia, we can never say that. We can never say we're trying this new treatment because right now there's not a treatment. We can say some days are better than others. And that's true. So also acknowledging compassion fatigue, whether we're a professional or whether we're a family caregiver, is important. So right now there's a lot of information about how we can take care of ourselves during the pandemic or how we can take care of ourselves during isolation. And I found lists that had everything from 8 to 10 to 12 to the 20 things you can do. And I took a lot of them and I tried to just narrow it down to five things that I think if we would focus on these 5 things, that hopefully that would help us a little bit. And the first one is avoiding information overload and limiting our screen time. I think the further we get into the season that we're in right now, we're going to want to limit screen time anyway, because since we are in an election year, there's lots of stuff out there right now. But there's also an awful lot about the pandemic that are not coming from reliable sources. And I get an awful lot of emails from people who are going, but Holly, I saw this on Facebook. It must be real. Well, and then you look into it. What was the source on that? You know, anybody can type up something, make it look like news and put it on Facebook. So only watch or listen to trusted sources, and please don't have it on all day long. I've had a lot of people, we've talked about just disabling the news notifications so that you're not getting those dings throughout the day. You only see it when you choose to go and look at it. Because if we've got those news notifications on, that's going to be all we're doing. We're going to be listening for that ding on the phone, and then we're going to open it up, and what's going to happen? If it throws us into that fight, flight, or freeze, our body's going to immediately dump cortisol. And when our body dumps cortisol, that stress hormone, that affects us physically. It's going to affect our sleep. It's going to affect our diet. It's going to affect if we even feel like getting out and doing any type of exercise. And it's because of what we're putting in through our eyes and through our ears. Have a set time to look at or listen to some news throughout the day, but don't have it be all day long. I've also encouraged some people to uninstall some social media if it's causing you to become too anxious. It's temporary. Just get off of it for a little while, come back on it later. Or you may have to go through and block some people, or block some organizations, or block some things that are sending out information that makes you anxious. Don't do that to yourself, because it is a rabbit hole where you click on one thing, then you click on another, and 2 hours later, I'm upset. So another thing, try to schedule an hour a day. If you can do an hour, you may have to start with 10 minutes, where you just have some time with no screen time, none, no computers, no TVs, no phone, nothing with screen. Go sit outside. It's beautiful right now. Right before we came on for this, I went out and I walked around the block just to be outside and take some really deep breaths. And there's birds, and I'm in downtown Fort Worth, and we've got birds singing in the trees. It's beautiful outside right now. Go sit outside, listen to music, have yourself a playlist of songs that make you feel good. Or learning to be comfortable with silence, because so many people are not comfortable with silence. And this is called mindfulness, whenever we can just start being comfortable. The second one is accepting the reality of the situation and naming your feelings. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this, and this is kind of going to piggyback on what we talked about earlier whenever we're going in to see our loved ones. But this is just across the board, whether you're a professional caregiver or you're a family caregiver. This is for everybody. If you can actually name what it is you're feeling. So Van said earlier, I am a counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And in counseling, we try to get people to name what it is that they're feeling, because we've got this term, if you can name it, you can tame it. That means you can own it, but you've got to be able to call it what it really is. What is this that I'm really feeling? Is it anger? Fear? Am I mad, disappointed, scared, frustrated, insecure, weak, bored, stressed, tired? There's a slew, but can you name it? And then get down to what is it that you're really feeling. The very first online support group that I did back in March, I remember having someone come on and she talked about, I'm just so mad. I am angry. I don't know. And she was mad. And as we talked, that turned into, I'm scared. This is fear. The anger is fear. And that was getting down to the root of it. And for most people, it traces back to fear. But acknowledging an unpleasant reality can help you reduce your stress and then clearly think through your feelings. But the easiest emotion is anger. That's why we have so many anger management classes out there, is because that's an easy emotion. It's easy to get mad. It's easy to try to overpower. It's hard to sit and think through that anger. Why am I so short with everybody right now? Why am I irritable? I'm scared. This is unknown times. Not certain about what's going to happen. And I don't like admitting that because most of us take pride in being able to say, I am in control. Or I think I'm in control anyway. And then own those feelings. It's okay to say, I'm scared to death. I don't know what's going on. We're not going to be happy all of the time, and that's okay. We're not supposed to be happy all the time. That's why we have all these different emotions and feelings. This hasn't been a very happy time over the last several months. But acknowledging uncomfortable feelings gives you power over them, and acceptance places that power in your hands. It indicates that you realize there's been a change and you're choosing to lean into that change rather than run away from it. It is not going to do any of us any good to stomp our feet and have a tantrum and go, no, 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 I want to go back to February. That isn't going to happen. We've got to lean into this and start to accept, and then we can start to work through. Sharing feelings with people that you trust, or just writing them down, getting them out of you and putting it on paper. And then feel your feelings. And I've got this listed in here a couple of times. It is okay for you to be having feelings right now that are not normal to you. This isn't a normal time. I'm much more worried if somebody is just going along and they're feeling exactly the same as they were in January or February. You should be having feelings that aren't normal to you during this time, but that's scary. And so folks will say things like, but Holly, I've never felt. Well, have you ever been through a time like this before? So it's okay to have feelings that you're not used to having. And then don't feel guilty about those. It's okay to have them. And try not to think of your feelings in a positive or a negative. They're just representing what you're feeling at the time, and that's okay. This is not a normal time. Why would you have normal feelings? It's okay. And then use this time to get you to know yourself a little bit better, because it may surprise you that I've had all this anger and then I realized this comes from fear. I didn't even realize that I could be afraid of something like this because I never even thought that I'd live in a time like this. So acknowledging it. And this is one of the most unique things that I have found that folks are doing right now is they're taking all of these feelings that they've got and they're turning those feelings into poetry. They're turning them into songs. I found a place online where folks are turning them into stories that they're writing for their future grandchildren about the time that we lived through. But they're using all of this pent up, these feelings and emotions, and they're becoming creative with it. Also taking advantage of this time to tackle those tasks that we've been putting off. We all have those books that we were going to read, that closet I need to clean out. I'm going to get to it later, cleaning out the garage, those type things. The third one is being able to think outside of yourself, helping somebody else. Think about the last time that you really helped somebody else and what a feeling that that gave you to be able to help another person. Now, as caregivers, we are really bad about asking for help. But when we don't ask for help, when we don't allow other people to help us, we're denying them that privilege of being able to have that feeling of helping others. So don't hesitate to ask for support. We talked about this morning on a program that we had with some family caregivers. That's something that comes up in support group a lot, is that I feel like I should be able to, or I've got this pride. There are people out there that will help. Most of the time, they just don't know how. They don't have any idea what it is that you need. But allow them the satisfaction of helping you, and then you turn around and help someone in return. And some of the things you can do is start reaching out to people. Reach out to people in your church or in a nursing home. Write letters. You know, we've kind of gotten away from handwritten notes and handwritten letters. Send cards to the staff at a hospital or send cards to the staff at nursing homes. Show up with homemade cookies, leaving a meal for somebody on their porch or leaving a plant. I've had several people tell me about folks leaving the mums right now, There were people who left Easter lilies back in the spring at the house of a church member. And it was just a very nice surprise to do something for someone else. And then we take that focus off of ourselves if we start thinking about, well, what are some things I can do for other people that might bring them some joy? And then seeking support wisely and staying connected. We've become very creative at ways to stay connected. You know, we had no idea how we were going to be able to carry on an entire education department, and we've done it. In fact, we've grown during this time by having to add an extra support group, having some type of educational program every day of the week. And all of these, we're able now to reach people in other states and in other countries. So finding a way to connect, being able to connect with your family and your friends, having support groups, being able to connect with church members, and then have some daily check-ins. I know that I've talked to some people who they've got people that they call every day at the same time just to check in on them. Even if it's a 5-minute phone call at 8 o'clock every night, I'm going to make this call. Or have that list of people to call, to text, to video chat, or to send notes to. But making sure that you are staying connected in some way. And then the fifth one is being able to focus and still continue to have a routine. And a lot of these are ones that we actually know to do. Every one of us know to do these things, but then I'm just going to ask you very honestly, are you doing them? Can you spout it off to other people, but you're not doing it yourself? Because we need to be able to practice what we preach, especially when we work in this field. We know that rather than running on coffee and pumpkin spice and the latte, all of that stuff that's out right now, we really need to be drinking water is what we need to be drinking. So making sure we're drinking more water, that we are having a healthy diet. I had mentioned mindfulness earlier. If you're somebody who does yoga, this is a great time to be doing yoga. And then I also wanted to mention recognizing physiological sensations like elevated heartbeats or palpitations. If you've ever had a panic attack, you know what I'm talking about. You usually can feel those coming on, and you can talk yourself through them. You can allow them to pass and to kind of neutralize. And one of the best things that you can do is positive self-talk. But you have to be very aware of what's happening in your body. We had talked about that broken heart syndrome. Being able to acknowledge, okay, wait a minute, I just started having palpitations, but what happened right before? Am I actually having a cardiac event, or am I getting upset because? And that's where you can talk yourself through. Take some deep breaths, put on some music, distract yourself. One of the very best things we can do is laugh. Get on YouTube and find some funny Carol Burnett videos. Watch The Golden Girls, something that is just silly, that doesn't mean anything, that will make us laugh. And then getting enough sleep. Another thing that we can be doing during this time is some cognitive exercises, some brain games. And an easy thing to do for our brain, this is great, is to use our non-dominant hand to do things. So if you will challenge yourself, I actually started doing this several months ago. I was texting with my left hand, and now I can text with my left hand as well as I text with my right. And if we were to scan the brain while we were doing that for the first time, it would be lighting up all over the place because it's not used to doing that. Learning a new language, starting to play an instrument that you either haven't played in a long time or maybe an instrument that you have never played before. But doing things, not just the easy crosswords. Easy crosswords are great and fine and good, but it's doing the easy crossword every day is the same as going to the gym and only lifting weights with your right arm, and you're not working on the rest of your body. So if you're only doing the easy crossword every day, you're working on that same path in the brain every single day. So go to the medium crosswords, but continuing to do some cognitive type exercises. And it can be as easy as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, sweeping the floor and holding that broom with your non-dominant hand. And then another thing, and this is where we can get into those negative coping skills, is binging. And we've heard the word binging a lot during the pandemic because people have been binging on TV, they have been binging on fast food. Alcohol sales are up over 35%, and that actually has gone up in the last several months. It was 30, and then it was 33. Now it's up over 35% alcohol sales. Shopping on Amazon is up. Home shopping is up, like on the TV, the QVC, Home Shopping Network type things. And then, of course, binge watching TV shows. And it is one thing to sit and watch a couple, but it's another thing to sit for 6 or 8 hours and to watch TV. That's not necessarily a positive coping skill. Or even being on social media. And we talked earlier about needing that break from social media. So working on a hobby or skill or trying something brand new, you can find just about anything for YouTube videos. You can look it up and find out how to do different things. We talked about the language, knitting, crocheting, painting, those type things. And then writing or mentally reciting a gratitude list once a day. Because I'll have people say, Holly, I don't like to write. I don't want to keep a journal. And just recite it mentally. There is still good in the world. There are still good things happening. And the sun was up this morning. And it's a beautiful day today. And I have, those of you who've been on other programs with me have heard me say many, many times, do you get up in the morning and do you say, oh, good God, it's morning? Or do you say, good morning, God? The way that we start our day, having the positive outlook, huge. And that plays into the rest of our day as well. But having that gratitude list, it's great to go over as you're going to sleep at night as well. Just mentally reciting gratitude list. If you are at home, still getting up like you are having a typical day, making sure that you have that routine, putting on your makeup, putting on jewelry. I know for our support groups, I'll have people say, Holly, look, I've got my earrings on just so you can see them. And they may not be leaving the house for several days, but they're getting dressed and getting ready as if they were going to a meeting, even though we're doing it all online. And then making a realistic schedule and sticking to it. This is my favorite, and I had to have it right here at the end because we all know that we need to exercise, but the majority of us don't do it. But as I was doing research for this, the number one thing that kept coming up over and over and over, research shows that exercise is the best coping skill that you can develop. So what are you doing to move more? And sometimes all it takes, and I told you just a minute ago, was like right before this program, I went out and just walked around the block one time. Took me 8 minutes. We are on a city block. But just being able to move a little bit more. And this is one of my very favorite cartoons that I had to share. The doctor is saying to him, because he apparently has said he doesn't have time to exercise, what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? And then here are some resources for you, and we're going to open up to questions in just a minute. But it's hard to do all of this alone. You can't do all of this alone. It's another quote that I've been seeing a lot recently, and it is, I think, perfectly for caregivers and for those of us who tend to want to do everything. And it says, I can do anything, but I can't do everything. I can do anything, but I can't do everything. So here are some local resources. I've got AGE-u-cate's website on there. Our friends at Dementia Friendly Fort Worth, who have programming for people with dementia who are at home Monday through Friday. They do programming. There's their website. Alzheimer's Association as well. If you have never been on that website, the alz.org, that's one that you could be on for a very long period of time because there's questions to just about anything, questions and answers. And then our friends at the Fort Worth Library, we've also been partnering with them this summer. And then here's our information at the West Center. There is Jamie's information. She's our VP of Community Education, and my information and our phone numbers and our emails. And you are welcome to call us at any time. We are long-term care here in Fort Worth, and we specialize in dementia care. We also have an education department. We do respite, and we have a day program that is not open right now, but hopefully will be open after the first of the year. All right, I see we've got a lot in chat.
We absolutely do.
Okay, I've got it where I can see it now. Anything that...
So we've had a couple of questions earlier on when you were talking about when you can get back in to see loved ones. And that was, someone wanted to know, do you have any hints for making masks and PPE less scary or less odd to those we're seeing?
You know, and that's part of the problem, is because we can't wear the, at least at long-term care, we can't wear the cloth mask. So we can't do the ones that might be funny or might be cute or might be a little more subtle. We're having to use the good old N95s, KN95s, or the surgical mask with the shield. Now, sometimes they will respond better to the surgical mask with the shield because it's not the white. It's more of either a white or, I mean, a blue or a yellow with a clear face shield. But I've had some people put stickers on them. I've had people put lipstick on the outside of them because we can't bring in the cloth ones. But I think also attributing it to us, we can do that as well. If they are to ask why we have it on, we can always say, well, I've got a cold and I didn't want to get you, you know, we make it about us and not about them.
Great. Yeah, that's really great advice. And most people kind of understand, I don't want to get you sick and exactly. I've got this, you know, stuffy or something like that. The other one was, and I know you can't necessarily speak for all parts of the country of people that might be in, or all parts of the world. We have some international people joining us today. But do you have an idea of what kinds of masks are going to be required when people start coming back in? Like at James L. West, can if I'm a visitor, can I wear a fun homemade mask, or are they going to have to be?
No, it's got to be it's got to be. And most places you are having to provide your own because, you know, we barely have enough for the staff kind of thing. So going out and getting, and you can order things on Amazon. I order these on Amazon because they're the duck, you can't hardly see it with my background up. It's more of the duck billed one, so it gives you more room in there to breathe, the KN95s. But for the most part, I think places you're having to provide your own. I'm sure there's going to be some out there that have it, but, and also just checking with your particular facility. They should be sending that out to you. Like I said, we had a big call with all of our family members, and are actually having PPE trainings today online for our families about how to properly put it on and how to properly take it off. So just keeping those in mind. But mask, gloves, some places you may have to have a gown, face shields.
Okay. So if for some reason, if you're a family member and you're going to go visiting, if your facility, your community has not explained all that to you, ask questions.
Absolutely, and call ahead of time so that you don't
so you know exactly, you don't want to be turned away when you can finally get there because you didn't have the right things.
Yeah, call ahead of time to make sure, am I going to need a face shield? Does it have to be an N95 or a KN95? Can I wear a surgical mask and a face shield? Because that's supposed to be the equivalent. Do I need to have gloves? That type thing.
Right. And if for those of you who are in this, or professional caregivers, or you in the long-term care world, be sure that your community is answering that question for your families. Be sure you're putting that information out, because you know when you can start letting families come back to visit, you certainly don't want to have to turn anybody away because you forgot to tell her they didn't understand how that had to happen. So,
and I see someone asked, did I say KN95s? Yes, I did. That's what this is right here. This is called a KN95 mask. So there's N95s and KN95s.
Okay, good. Let's see. Oh, somebody, this is great. Could you comment on the effects of pandemics on the home care workers?
Oh,
about our home care.
Sure. And it's been very similar as it is with our professional ones, except that I know several home care workers who ended up being out of work for a while because families were so scared they weren't letting people come in. You know, they were needing even therapy. They were needing physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy at home, and people were afraid to let them come in. But that same type of compassion fatigue, whenever we are going into the homes, and then just the additional stress that it is putting on us in healthcare, and again, we're having a whole lot of anger. But when we think about why is it that I'm so angry? I'm angry because I don't know what's going to happen next. And it gets down to, I'm scared. I'm scared. And the other thing that we can really track anger all the way down to get to the root of it is also grief, because we are grieving what was. All of us are. We are grieving what we had before this happened, whether we're a home care worker, we're a professional healthcare worker that's out in a long-term care, assisted living, we're a social worker, we're a nurse, a family caregiver. We're grieving. We did this after 9/11 as a country. We went through this time of grief because we were scared and we didn't understand and we didn't know where we were going next. This has kind of been that next big as a country because it's affected every single person in the country. And so you don't meet somebody that it didn't affect. This has affected everybody. So it's grief. And we're all at different places in the grief. Some of us may be in that, because think about all those stages that we have in grief, where we may be mad, or we may be depressed, or we may just be kind of getting to the point of acceptance. Okay, this is the way it's going to be now. And then something new comes out and you got to change your whole PowerPoint. You know, that's exactly what happened last week, where, you know, okay, we are going to start to open up. This is going to shift everything. This is going to change things. So being able to call it what it is so important. And it may not sound like it's that big of a deal, but it really is whenever you can say it. You know, I'm mourning. I am mourning. I am mourning having to be in my office with the door shut most of the day. I don't like this. I want to be able to be social and to go to other people's offices and visit or hang out at the water cooler. That's a real thing.
It really is. And I like your advice about just naming it. Name it, because I think we often function with the wrong label on our feeling.
Yep.
And when we can really see what it is, and that fear is showing up in all kinds of other ways right now.
Yeah, it sure
we
is.
see that in our world. There was another question. I think I know the answer to this. Your information, first of all, your information today is terrific. I would absolutely second that, Holly. Is there a simple pamphlet or something to give family members to read before we actually start reopening for visitation? I'm thinking the answer is going to be unless you're creating it right this
We're
minute.
Creating it, actually. Jamie and I, in about 30 minutes, yeah, we are creating our own here at the West Center. In fact, we are meeting at 3:30 today to finish one up. We're creating one on our own that we're going to send out to our family members on pre-visits. And I'm going to talk a lot about what this was right here, what we just talked about, because everybody's just so excited, but I don't want anybody walking out of here feeling completely defeated, deflated, devastated. We just need to be ready to what are we walking into, what should we expect, what could happen kind of thing. And then we're also going to have a card that we give our families on the way out after their first visit that is going to be resources, this type of things. So that is something that we can, whenever we meet here in about 30 minutes, Jamie and I will talk more about, we need to be able to make that where we can, or we need to do a program on it, but put something together. I probably need to write a pamphlet.
I think it is.
Yeah, because we've got it. We just need to get it put together. And all of this has literally just happened since Fridays, right. Whenever all of this came out. So,
right. So I think probably everyone's going to have to write their own, because we've never done this before. So there's not anything sitting out there in a rack already to address how to reopen during a pandemic. That one hasn't been written.
Yep.
That one hasn't been
and
written.
Being able to think through the effect it's going to have on family caregivers, the effect it's going to have on the residents, and then the effect it's going to have. You know, we've got staff that have been here for 6 months. They've never worked here when we've had families in. They don't even know what it's like to have families in if there's somebody that's so we've got to stop and think about that too. This is going to be different. Like if it's a new CNA or a new nurse, oh, we've got family members in here now, and that's a whole different. So it is.
Sure. I hadn't thought of that piece, but yeah, that's a whole different environment than what they've been working in.
It is.
And some of your veterans, that especially those who haven't been in it very long, it's that they've probably forgotten what that was like and all that. So here we are adjusting again.
We are.
Okay, well, I don't see any, let me see, wait, one more question.
Somebody's asking of local places to buy the N95 or KN95s. That I'm not sure of. I've been ordering mine off of Amazon and get them the next day. I order a pack of 10, and I think it was like $15 for a pack of 10, and literally have them the next day. I just keep them sitting here on my desk.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure if those are being sold anywhere. I know they've been in short supply just out in public.
Right. Yeah, I'm not either. It's another one of those just hunt and gather.
Yeah.
see what you can find out there. So, well, Holly, this has been wonderful. I have sat here and taken so many notes, and have already thought of several people that I need to send this to if they weren't able to be on here. And so, to all our participants, if you're also realizing that I know some people that need this information, as I said, we will be sending out a follow-up email either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow that will have this recording, and we'll put up that contact information again. I think that'll be great to include that Holly had at the end. So if you're needing some of those resources, you can jump right on those.
Right, and I just want to then stress to just please check with your individual facility. If your loved one's at an assisted living, long-term care, you know, we're long-term memory care. So, you know, it may be different at each one, the way that they're going to reopen, because everybody's got their different rules and regs and those type things. So please do check with your individual places where your loved ones are.
Absolutely. Holly only stands for the West Center.
Yes.
As far as particulars go.
Right.
So, again, thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for the AGE-u-cate green screen, but hey, we could see Holly, and that's what we really needed to see today. Everyone that participated, thank you for joining us. We're so glad you spent this hour with us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. So thank you, Holly. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And there's someone asking about the CEU credit. I think Jamie had put up earlier in the chat about how to get that.
She did. And just so everyone knows, we will definitely include that in the follow-up email. We'll Perfect. Make that very prominent with the email address that you need to send an email to contact about CEUs.
Okay.
We'll make sure that's out there where
Thank
everybody
you.
can find it.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Holly.
Bye-bye.